Good evening. My name is Mark Barnico, and I'm the Executive Director of the University of Chicago Francis and Rose Ewan campus here in Hong Kong, our premier location in Asia, representing UChicago values of free and open discourse, rigorous debate, and the exchange of ideas. We're again broadcasting tonight's event via Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube Live from the UChicago Ewan campus in Hong Kong. If audience members have questions for any of the panelists this evening, you can submit them through the questions and answer button by first registering on Zoom. And I also encourage you to visit our website at www.uchicago.hk for the latest news and information on events hosted by the UChicago Ewan campus, or follow us on our UChicago Ewan campus Facebook page. Tonight we continue our series Pop Asia, which highlights events, trends, and cultural phenomenon that originate in Asia and impact the rest of the world. Our program this evening will continue our NFT art series with a conversation with 3 art creators. Our guests include 3 successful artists, a musician and the first to drop music in an Asia NFT auction, a digital artist and early founder of the NFT movement, and an artist who's been practicing digital art for over 30 years. My introductions for each of them will be brief. For more detailed information on the speakers and additional resources to help you learn more about this subject, you can click on the hyperlinks on our events page. Let me begin. Professor Jason Salavon is an associate professor and digital artist in the Department of Visual Arts and the Computation Institute at the University of Chicago. He's been creating digital art for over 30 years using custom computer software processes of his own design to manipulate and reconfigure pre-existing media and data to create new visual works of fine art. His final compositions are exhibited as art objects, such as photographic prints and video installations, while others exist in a real-time software context. Examples of his artwork are included in prominent public and private collections, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Whitney Museum of Art, and the Art Institute of Chicago, among others. Reviews of his exhibitions have been included in Art Forum, Art in America, the New York Times, Wired, and the Wall Street Journal. Judy Mam is co-founder of DADA.art, the world's only visual conversation platform with a rare digital art marketplace on Ethereum blockchain. The online platform has over 130,000 digital drawings. Judy is a pioneer in NFT art and developing the invisible economy. And finally, Hanjin Tan is an award-winning musician, producer, singer, songwriter, and actor. He's the first Chinese musician to release a music NFT, and he's with us tonight. And I'd like to turn it over to Hanjin to begin with. Why don't you get us started tonight by telling us really what motivated you to be the first in Asia to drop a music NFT? And perhaps you could also share with the audience that's interested in this, what it was like to go through the process as a newcomer to the NFT art world.
Hi, Mark. Hi, guys. How are you guys doing? Happy to be here. I love to share. I started my journey in Clubhouse, and 2 weeks in, I found myself in the room where they were talking about NFTs, which I thought could be a new drum machine, and found myself between MC Hammer and Tiffany Haddish, and I thought, I'm not leaving this room. And so they were talking about NFTs, and a light bulb went off, because I've been trying to solve this issue of the income gap in the Chinese music industry for the longest time. And the Chinese music industry, unlike other languages, musicians are essentially being bullied by the people in power, and to the extent that no new musician can make a living off music itself, and this has been a problem that's been like worsening over the past 20 years. I grew up in an era where CDs failed, MP3s failed, and free platforms that seem to be offering the 1,000 fans model to Chinese musicians are essentially not working. NFTs present a possibility for young Chinese musicians and current Chinese musicians to adopt a patron artist model, whereby we can go back to work like the way Mozart and Beethoven did, one creator to a few sponsors or patrons, where they could, at the right price and the right incentive, provide a living for the creators, and creators provide music, soul food, bragging rights to their patrons. And this is a good lifeline model for musicians to wait out and to keep working on their craft until the day they get their breaks. And that's, I think, what's necessary right now in the industry. And NFTs came in a very good time. And I've been trying to evangelize it, and I find that it's not enough. And I decided that I had to demonstrate how it works. So that was what my first NFT was about. It's essentially a demo of how a musician with a laptop could very simply put out an unreleased piece of work, an MP4 file as a cover, and a Zoom call as a perk, as a gift to their buyers. And there have been musicians that have been following in these footsteps, and I'm very happy about it, but it's still not enough. So what I'm gonna carry on doing after the first proof of validity is to keep on dropping demos to prove sustainability. NFTs don't have to exist in its simplest form. It could exist in different variations. You could do copies. You could do pure music drops like Disclosure did, or like I'm gonna do in a month's time, which is I can't say, I think, yet. And then you could tie up with other creators and collaborate and make pieces of art or visual art, music crossovers, multimedia, audio, visual, NFTs, anything that could be presented in the form of NFT, which is essentially just a mapping protocol. A non-fungible token is essentially something that ties your unique wallet address to a URL which points to a unique asset in the digital space, or it could state in the NFT or outside of the NFT what asset it points to and therefore represents. The systems are not as good as you would like them to be, but we are still in its infancy. So this is a very good time for musicians to jump in, especially in a marketplace that is mainly catered to digitally native visual artists. And I think it's a good time to try and to get people come in and hopefully be able to reduce the income gap. And if it works in the small industry, like the Chinese music industry, it could work in other industries, and the income gap is causing people to be unhappy. And if we could show that NFTs is a way that could reduce this income gap, many people would have hope to fight, something to fight for, something to work for in the future. And so that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I've been asked to present a song, so maybe a short piece, something about hope, something about dreams. When you wish upon a star, makes no difference who you are. Anything that you desire will come to you. Does that work?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hanjin. That's a great introduction. And we wanted to give all of the artists equal time. So we really appreciate you bringing your art to the program. Now I'm going to turn it over to Judy. Judy, I'm fascinated with your career in the digital space and how your interest has evolved in NFT over the last few years. Could you tell the audience a little bit more about DADA and what got you involved in NFT art and where you think this whole thing is headed?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me, and it's going to be hard to top that. but I have I have some art that I want to show you because I think that's the best way for people to understand DADA. And I think since we're talking about visual art, what better way so people can see it, right? So let me see if you see my screen. Do you?
Yes.
Okay. So DADA is a platform where people speak to each other through drawings. It's a digital platform, it's on desktop, you come in, we have a very simple digital tool, a digital canvas where you make a drawing and someone from anywhere in the world can reply to you with another drawing. So these drawings that you see are made by different people from all over the world. Each one of them is made by someone else. So people come to DADA to engage in visual conversation. By drawing together, they create community and they make enduring friendships and very strong bonds. And so it's really a remarkable kind of social networking, which because people are creating art, there's really just freedom, self-expression, no bullying, no trolling, stuff like that. We have made about 130,000 drawings. Right now we're like 132,000 drawings, and people come to DADA just to draw for the love of it. However, they're not expecting to sell anything. They're just drawing to express themselves and to be in community and to collaborate with other artists. And we believe that we have, that this has created enormous economic value. So we are pioneers in the NFT world because we launched our first collection of NFTs, which at the time weren't even called NFTs. They used to be called rare art or blockchain art or crypto art. We launched on October of 2017, which was right after the CryptoPunks and right before the CryptoKitties, which made like the first splash of NFTs around the world, let's say. And this was something that we basically curated several, we launched them on Halloween, so we needed something that was kind of like topical for that. We curated different drawings from different conversations. We launched like 16,000 of them with different levels of scarcity. And that's why, we are considered one of the very pioneering NFT projects. We were after the CryptoPunks, we were the second project to launch art on Ethereum. And we were the first actually to launch art by actual artists, not generated by an algorithm. So for instance, since then, we have created live drawing performances in different places. This conversation was created at the live at the Tate Gallery in London last year. So how can we capture and distribute this value without destroying the magic of DADA? We knew that if we were to put like a shopping cart on top of each drawing, it would really destroy what we call the DADA effect. DADA is like a garden where art grows, is how I like to see it. And if we did an overt marketplace on top of it, we believe that it would really completely change and even destroy the fabric of the community and even of the art. So we created an economic system that incentivizes intrinsic motivations, which is why people come to draw in DADA. People come to participate, to express themselves, to create art just with no reason. No one comes in with the expectation to sell because they can't do it. People come to see what somebody else responded to them, and to start this dialogue, which is like a music jam where somebody starts with a theme or a topic or colors, and people follow through. And this incentive framework takes into account people's intrinsic motivations, as well as what is fair to do and what is free to do. So between the tension between their personal passions and their basic material needs. And this economic system basically separates radically the art making from the marketplace. So what happens, when we discovered the blockchain, we thought this is exactly what we need. DADA has been around since 2014, and we had been trying to find ways to monetize this value. And before, digital content, because it can be endlessly reproducible, it was impossible to understand what value it could have. But with the blockchain and the fact that you can tokenize any digital content, you create a smart contract. We also were the first ones to embed royalties into our smart contract so that artists could get something on secondary sales. You can put the, like authenticity, all of that. we thought this was great, but we also thought that the blockchain really allowed for us to think of a completely different system, of a system that was not based on scarcity and speculation and competition, but because it's peer-to-peer, because it's decentralized, because it can allow to really empower different people to participate. We thought that that was its promise. And what ended up happening is that in the crypto art market that we see today, actually took what already exists in the regular art market and basically replicated it, but on steroids, right? So the incentives tend to be just who makes more money, who sells the most, who is the most popular, and you end up having, you know, the capturing of value is more by the collectors, which get 90% on secondary sales, and you also get like this really steep, you know, curve of very, very few artists at the top that capture most of the money, just like in the real art world, and a lot of very talented, hardworking artists that just can't compete. So we were trying to come up with something that was completely different, right? And that was less unequal. In contrast, the invisible economy encourages abundance, collaboration, and creativity. You come in, you draw, you do something because you like it. That in itself, it's its own reward, but you are going to be rewarded also by your contribution. And eventually, you know, we're hoping to give some kind of safety net to the people who participate. And we have, you know, anyone can come to DADA, anyone can draw. You don't have to be an artist. It's free to use. We don't have any kind of constitutions or vetting or curation, but we do have a system that takes into account what you contribute. So we have like these contribution metrics where we divide on how people are contributing, and you don't necessarily need to be an artist or need to draw. We have people in our system now in the invisible economy that are contributing with their thoughts, they're contributing with their technological expertise, they're contributing by being great supporters of DADA, etc. So this is, for example, we mapped the contribution of a live drawing performance that we did in Rome, where, you know, the artists were explaining how they felt, not how much they made or what they gained, but how they felt during the preparation, during the performance, and afterwards. And our system model is very, very simple. We have created a token, which we call the invisible token, where on the top you have, you know, the value that is created, and then on the bottom, the revenues of that value are funneled through this incentive framework of intrinsic motivations, of passions, and they are not, you know, they're separated. So the DADA community can continue create value and continue creating drawings, while the invisible economy, you know, channels that flow into the community. So basically, money can flow into the system because we have the protections and the contribution metrics to protect the community. And so all the actions are meaningful, creative, and are rewarding themselves. And through the token, we can capture that value as a community that creates sustainable long-term wealth for artists and collectors as well. Thank you.
Excellent, Judy. Thank you so much. I have a lot of follow-on questions from that introduction, but I really appreciate and your journey is interesting for those that want to read more about that. We have that on our website. Jason, you're a successful digital artist with over 30 years of experience, yet you're skeptical about NFT art. Can you tell the audience a little bit about why you may be reluctant to jump in, as Hanjin and Judy have, and what would it take to change your mind? But first, I think you wanted to show us some of your art that you've been doing for all these years.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for having me. It's a joy to be here and be engaged in such a rich conversation. This is really interesting new territory, and I would say I'm ambivalent, right? I have mixed feelings about the onset of NFTs. Having had, as you said, I've been making computational art for 30 years or more, but certainly publicly 30 years or so. And one thing that I'm really excited about is The entire art world has been skeptical about art made with computers for decades, and that has been an uphill battle, and that battle appears to be won. It appears that the world is ready for art, to take art seriously that's made through computational means. That's a really exciting development that's attendant to this NFT excitement. Yeah, I think one way for me to talk about my feelings about NFTs is just to share a couple examples of work. One example I would have a question about: how would this be a meaningful use of NFTs? And then another one where I'm open to a conversation about that. And so much of this, I think, as a preface, I think we spend a lot of time talking about NFTs, which are essentially pointer-like contracts, and they aren't actually the artwork. They are necessarily separate from the work. We're not spending much time talking about the work, and that's a little bit concerning. So all of these high-profile NFT sales, no one spends much time having a critical conversation about the value of the work. It's really located in commerce and contracts, which is probably not that interesting long-term. Okay, so let me show a couple things. So this is sort of my standard sort of extended talk slide deck, and I'll just show a couple examples. This painting up here was something that was above, this was above my bed in the 70s. It was made by my father. So he was a classically trained painter who is a child of the 60s. So that's what this yields. And just to give you a sense of my background and relationship to fine art, I've been steeped in painting and art making from the time I can remember. So I'll start with the most recent thing I've done. So this was a project completed during the pandemic. It's called Little Infinity. It's a 72-foot wallpaper currently installed at the new Kinder building at the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston. So the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston built a modern and contemporary wing, and they built it throughout the pandemic, which is a real achievement, and commissioned me to do a project to adorn the exterior of the photo galleries. And so this is a 72-foot photographic mural consisting of 300,000 little squares. And these squares are sampled sort of evenly from an archetypal data set, the ImageNet data set, which is used to train AIs to learn, essentially to learn all things. And that's the proposition. So ImageNet is 14 million images. This is sampled from it. And then these sampled images are rearranged to form this sort of cascading sort of waterfall effect. But the ordering is based on the internal orderings in the data set. So it's really a kind of reconfiguration of pre-existing data, which is one of the things I do frequently. So here's a point of view. This is the actual file in some sense. It's at normal resolution, it's about 200,000 pixels wide. And so there's a question about, and I've been asked directly, well, you should NFT this project. This piece needs an NFT. And I understand the question. And at the same time, this object is just not as good as the piece in Houston. It's just not, it's not the same quality. Okay, so I think that's my essential question. I'll leave it at that as far as showing work. But the essential question is, what is the value of art in person, physical objects crafted for environments, considering sort of presence of an audience, versus a kind of file-based art form that lives only on desktops and phones, and that you, as a buyer, you buy a pointer to this object where the object is still available to the entire world in its native form. So one can purchase for millions or for dollars some sort of certificate of authenticity and sort of certificate of ownership and maybe rights of transfer, the thing your NFT is pointing to is a file of some kind. At this point, I think that can broaden. There's a file that can be available to everybody. We can all have the exact same version on our desktop. And so I have questions about these forms, the form of the NFT and its relationship to files, essentially, as opposed to sort of my historical relationship with art that exists in physical space, that is designed for humans to sort of be around, that considers things like scale, that considers things like resolution. These things are kind of empty or not part of the NFT conversation. The only other thing, I'll leave it at that and sort of open up the conversation, obviously, but there's another question I have about the hype that surrounds this form, and that the hype seems to feel related to other kinds of markets right now. So you have interesting speculation in GameStop, or you have speculation in Dogecoin. And there is something, I don't think it's coincidental that there is a really sort of media is enjoying these sort of speculative bubbles around really interesting, complex sort of value propositions. So I'll leave it at that. But as I said, I'm not closed-minded about NFTs. I just have questions.
Great. Hopefully this program will help us answer some of those questions for you, Jason. I want to take one of the questions from the audience. I'm going to direct this at Hanjin. The question, and I see Judy's put a comment in there already. I question how NFTs help the income gap. Does this mean it helps somewhat rich people get more rich and rich people become super rich? I think that's a really interesting way to kind of lead into this, because you have this as a passion mission for you to try to help close that gap. And then I have a follow-on question, if you want to respond to that, Hanjin. The follow-on question is, I read up on your sale of the NFT. The way I understand it was you didn't sell 100% of it. You sold 50% of it to a buyer, and then you retained the right to 50%. And I was wondering, in addition to answering the previous question, can you just explain the economics and the ownership of the NFT that you sold?
Thank you. I'll answer the second half first because it's easier to answer. It's been misunderstood. Whoever's asking the question, you've misunderstood. The NFT was completely sold. I don't think there's a way to well, there is. You can fractionalize your NFT into two parts and like sell half and keep half. But like, I did it as a demo on OpenSea, and on OpenSea you can't do that. So my NFT was completely sold to the buyer, and so I do not own any bits of the NFT anymore since sale. And the only thing that me and my buyer have agreed to was that we have a consensus whereby well, it's easy to come to a consensus when you only have two parties. He has a vote, I have a vote to whether or not to release this song to the public. So unless we're both in agreement to release a song to the public, it will not be released. Or conversely, if I want to release it and he's like, I want to keep it for myself, that's his. I've given him the right to say like, no, I don't want to release it. I want to keep it for myself. I want to feel good about that. And that was part of my agreement with the buyer. And the first part of the question about NFTs being for rich people and celebrities to get more rich, that is actually correct. But at the same time, when you're in an industry like me, the Chinese music industry, whereby in the macro real world, there are no longer any real means for newcomers and current musicians who are not yet celebrities to see past the year. NFTs become an extremely viable option, not as a supplementary income anymore. It could be a substantial form of income for people who are not making rent and not making their insurance payments. So that is why I'm so gung-ho and motivated every day to wake up and like talk to people on the phone, handhold them through their MetaMask setups, help them choose the right platform, help them decide if they should wait for the Binance platforms because Ethereum might be too expensive for them. Yeah, in a nutshell, when in a place where you're still making money in the real world, yes, it is a place for people who have fans and have influence and have money to make more money. That is true. But it's also true that when you're in a place where the real world no longer serves you, NFTs is a way to actually help you keep doing what you love to do. And that's what I'm trying to do in the Chinese music industry.
I have concrete stories about this, answering that question. We know we have artists in our platform that have also, made NFTs in other platforms. So we have an artist from Venezuela who has made like 12,000 drawings in our platform. Her name is Maria Garcia. And our artists, other artists like Hanjin helped her, handheld her to onboard her to other platforms because Venezuela, as you know, it's a very, very dire economic situation. And she's not a trained artist. She's really like and she's incredible, but she's not a trained artist. To make a long story short, she started selling her NFTs on Rarible. And because Rarible also was issuing a token, and she was selling, she was able to buy a house. She was able to buy a small, modest house for her and her mother because they were living in the place where she worked. She used to work at a car wash. And by car wash, I don't mean a shiny mechanical thing. They were washing cars by hand. And with the sales of her NFTs, which were not super expensive by any stretch, and your accrual of value of the token, and given the economic circumstances in Venezuela, she was able to buy herself a house. She was able to, this is proof. This is concrete proof. Recently also, people bought some of our creeps and weirdos, and this was like, from 4 years ago, we had on the secondary sales, we had baked in very like generous royalties for the artists. So we had artists that got like this surprising windfall. One of them also a Venezuelan artist who is currently living in Chile, hasn't seen his parents for 6 years because it's, economically impossible. He got from his sales like $40,000, and we asked him, what are you gonna do with the money? And he said, I'm gonna bring my parents, I'm going to get them out of Venezuela. I'm going to bring them to Chile with me. And I can give you examples of many artists that may not be at those dire circumstances, but who have always struggled to make rent or to be recognized. And now, not only do they, we have one artist that basically right now, he has become so well known that he's actually making most of his living now from the NFTs. But also what they are also getting as this direct relationship with their collectors. There's like this community. So it's not only that they're making art, but and they're surviving from it, but also that these peer-to-peer interactions are very rich also in human collaboration and connection.
Judy, you mentioned community in your presentation, and you talked about like no bullying, no trolling. You talked about a safety net, and it almost sounds like it's communal. Is the safety net mean that there's going to be income shared across the people that participate in the platform?
Yes, that's correct. And I wanted to start with the no bullying and no trolling, because we have learned by creating a platform, every design decision that you make will have a behavioral outcome, right? So if you design like many, social media for engagement, well, outrageous things drive engagement. So then that's where you have trolling or bullying or very aggressive behaviors, because those platforms actually get more eyeballs from that kind of behavior. But if you design for collaboration, if you design for people not to compete against each other, if you design for people to have a conversation and to have like a back and forth where it's art, there's no advertising, also a different model, there's no, then what you get is this incredible relationship between people. So there's a safety net in terms of the experience of how people come to the platform and they feel they're in a safe place to explore. We did the tool that we have is really so simple because we don't want people to be intimidated with lots of bells and whistles and like layers and stuff. So it's just draw, just express yourself and see what happens. And people feel safe because the people are welcoming, the platform is welcoming. And then in terms of what we're going to do, once we get, you know, the revenues from what we put out there, or how we're going to do it, which is also going to be trying to incentivize people to collect, not so that they can like flip art or make a lot of money, but to actually participate in the community and participate in curation or in other things. This is going to be distributed according to our contribution metrics, yes. And, you know, it's gonna flow to everyone, but it's not gonna be a quid pro quo, because there have been platforms that have done that, where they say, oh, if you do this, you get a token. And that creates a lot of issues because people immediately try to game that system, right? They're like, I'm going to do this 500,000 times and I'm going to get 500,000 tokens. That's not how it's going to work. It's about making art it takes effort. This is why also we don't have a lot of trolls, because trolls don't want to make the effort. You know, trolls, they just want to go do something stupid. And when they see that we have a system in which if you do that, you're not really discovered or no one really sees it, you need to put some effort and some kind of, intention. And then you will, reap some rewards.
Great. Thank you so much for that explanation. I'll probably come back to you with some more questions about that. Jason, I'm going to turn to you real quick. Beeple sold his work a month or so ago, 2 months ago, for 69 million. He was pretty much unheard of in the art world. He had no museum representation. He had no museums collecting him. He had no gallery representation. And he, out of nowhere, came and, has this large record number associated with his artwork. Can you speak to that? And can you speak to the fact that is real art only art collected, represented, and collected by museums and represented by galleries? Is that the only way that we can really define good art?
That's an awesome question. Well, a couple things. Congrats to Beeple. Good for him. That's fantastic for him personally. I think it's fantastic. I would not want to be on the buy side of that particular deal. I wouldn't want to be holding that particular investment, to be honest. I don't think at all that galleries, museums, the sort of conventional fine art world that involves collectors, curators, writers, and artists, I don't think that's the only place that art exists at all. In fact, I have been an evangelist for a kind of flattening of hierarchies, in that I like to think in terms of visual culture, and that in my courses I speak more to visual culture. Now, I come from fine art, and it's my personal background, and it's the world I've been the most active in. So I have the most familiarity with the details of it, but I've also worked on apps, and I've worked in video games, and I've worked on film production. So I have some familiarity with like the broader canvas of visual culture. And I see NFTs as a really interesting development in that broader context. I think it's fantastic that it democratizes the ability for people to make digital things that other people find interesting, and monetize it. That people can make money selling art. I think of it as closer to, and I don't mean this as my current perception of it is it's closer to like Pokemon, and closer to trading cards, and closer to those sorts of collectibles. The fine art version is bizarre to me. That particular thing is bizarre. I don't think so. If a Van Gogh or Rembrandt sells for those kinds of numbers, we have some kind of understanding that these objects have stood the test of time. They've been vetted through kind of canonical conversations, art historical conversations. That doesn't mean that those canons can't be upended. And I do think we're looking at some revolutions in fine art, actually. I think that change is afoot, and I think NFTs might represent that. But the actual sort of in the literal specific case of an artist making work that looks like it's derivative of other artists' work and doesn't seem particular, the work itself does not feel particularly fresh to me. And yet it because it has this new version of a certificate of authenticity, which is a really useful thing. I'm not questioning the value of NFTs and blockchain in general, but the specifics, I would definitely question that. And I think it's interesting that an end around of the entire art world has happened, except for Christie's. There is one big art world player involved, and they get a nice piece of that sale. Good for them too, I guess. And there was a recent sale a couple days ago. I think Judy probably knows more about it than I do, but CryptoPunks,
yes.
CryptoPunks.
That project. I mean, that we're now at Pokemon. We're looking at Pokemon. Those are like,
I
and in the
actually-
prospectus for the work, you guys should look up this. You guys should look up this CryptoPunks thing. In the prospectus for the work, there's a conversation about how one of these little bitmap characters is super rare, and you can't, they don't make many of these alien versions or whatever. That is the language of Pokemon. That is the language of, so, that seems odd. And I think the buyers are coming. I'm gonna speculate real time that there's a certain naivety among the buyers about how art works, and I think they're gonna be surprised when no one wants to buy their stuff that they bought. So I would question the sort of resale possibilities in this space for these particular, and no offense, no slight meant to the makers. Good for them and interesting, but bitmap art has been around for a long time, and they're not the inventors of it, and they're just inheriting a thing that's happened. So if we're interested in things like innovation and credit to people who come up with new moves, if the new move is a new kind of certificate of authenticity pointing to the art, and the new thing is that they use the blockchain to sort of verify their art, that is not artistically interesting. That is culturally interesting, and maybe that's why it's valuable. But certainly the certificate is far more interesting than the art object, and that seems reversed and doesn't seem sustainable. Like, ultimately, people are going to want to have things that they can be proud of and show their friends. Another question I have is my experience with fine art has been that collectors, God bless them, want to have dinner parties and show off their art in the background at their dinner parties. They want to have people see the work they buy. And if the works, and I'm talking about the high end of this conversation now, if the works exist on phones and the only sort of validation is that everybody knows that you own the smart contract, it seems sort of impoverished relative to a physical experience of an Anselm Kiefer huge painting in your huge dining room. And I feel like, I'm not sure for who it will be long-term interesting to own digital, really, really, really expensive digital files on their phones and on their desktops. If one thing the pandemic has shown me, it's that this virtual space, while super interesting and rich, is really limited. I've taught computational art making at the university for 12 years, and I always require my classes to make things. You're working computationally, but in the end, you're printing it, you're making an installation, you're projecting it, you're doing a performance. And during the pandemic, I've relaxed that because our classes have been remote. So I've been experiencing only PDFs of art or only JPEGs. And my personal sort of response to that is that it's a far more impoverished form relative to the breadth of possibilities of making things. So, and that's not to say that NFTs can't point to real physical objects. I expect that will be a really interesting, useful development, actually. Like, I've been making certificates of authenticity, physical certificates of authenticity that I've signed for 20 something years. And NFT seems like a better way of doing that, right? Famously, the artist, the fantastic conceptual artist, Saul Lewitt, who makes wall drawings, and the wall drawings are basically the result of a set of instructions. And they can be moved around. They are very ephemeral, and they definitely predict, in some sense, algorithmic art making. So he's a really important figure. He famously had a gallerist had lost the certificate of authenticity to the work, and the courts adjudicated this loss and decided that the work didn't exist anymore. So you have a really interesting moment where the loss of a certificate of authenticity for an ephemeral art object invalidates its existence in a legal sense. And I think NFTs sort of will help with that problem, right? It's going to be hard to lose an NFT, although, you know, we know all these stories about people losing their the passwords to their crypto.
That's a really good point that I wanted to actually ask as a follow-on question to
Sure.
Hanjin, to bring him in back into the conversation. You know, how do you, this agreement that you have with this buyer, how do you, is that reflected in the smart contract, or is that just something that you both have sort of agreed upon? And like, how do you enforce it? Not all relationships are, you know, perfect over time, and it could go another way at some point down the road. How do you, you know, how do you reflect that in this transaction?
When the transaction took place, all that happened was an email. And I wrote something in my description that implied that we could discuss it, and that was it. In the future, however, I think there are things that can be done to make NFTs more meaningful. Right now, NFTs basically are providing transparency, and you can't change it. That these are the two properties that it's offering to people whose work do not enjoy a good system of provenance and or residuals. So that's the promise it's making, but it is by no means a perfected system. We're far from it, I think. And I'm working with a company to create decentralized contracts or simple memos that basically solidify agreements between buyer and seller, so that naughty first-time buyers don't become nasty second-time sellers, and likewise. And this could be very bad for both the creator and the marketplace as a whole. What could be good and nice for people could become nasty really quickly if measures are not being worked on. So like, I think we should take our time and figure out systems hand in hand and try to make things more, I don't want to use the word protect, but yeah, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to protect good people from being bullied by bad people or trolls or naughty people. Mm-hmm. And that's what it was. That's what it's going to be.
Since you're sitting here in Asia with the team here on the UN campus, some of our audience would like to know what the NFT world looks like in Hong Kong, Singapore, in China in general. Can you describe the environment for NFT now?
It looks new, it looks fresh. At the same time, it looks really frightening to a lot of the status quo. The macro economy is like, what is this? Or most people just go like, oh, you made a lot of money. No, I didn't make a lot of money. I haven't even switched my Ethereum out of Ethereum yet. And I don't intend to, because I don't see it as a way of making money, not yet, but maybe in the long run, it's a way for people who are finding difficulty to make a living in the real world, to make a living through patron relationships in the NFT, because it's really hard actually to amass something like 10,000 fans, especially in a fungible trade like music, where everyone recognizes a song's value at 99 cents USD. And like, how do you charge more for it? You can't, so you need more people. But like when you sell it when you're providing your stuff for free on these platforms, no one's gonna pay for it. So why don't you instead focus as a musician on finding those few fans who can become sponsors and help you and grow with you. And there are a lot of people who are there. I've heard this countless times where they say like, I knew the chain smokers before they were chain smokers. If only I could like buy their NFTs before then and support them and like, you know, grow with them. And like, because they want to be part of the growth. They want to be invested in their A&R. And like, there are people out there like that for every musician who's not yet a celebrity. And like, that could make a difference between, you know, seeing the next Quincy Jones or not seeing the next Quincy Jones. And that's what I'm thinking about.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to direct this question at you, Judy, but Hanjin, you might have a few thoughts about it as well. From one of our audience members, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how the price of ETH affects the value of NFT art. Just to go on, I listed my first NFT at a price that I believed reflected the value of my work, but with the rising value of the ETH, the cost of my work is now dramatically higher. Do you see this as a concern as well from your perspectives?
Sure. I mean, we are in the middle of a very speculative bubble. It has really raised, you know, in price, and of course, it does affect the artist not only because of, you know, you priced it at a certain thing, and then it's 4 times the amount that you priced it, and you feel that that may be not reflective of what you did, but also because with all this demand, the price of gas, which is what people need to pay in order to mint their art, has also skyrocketed. And that is a huge concern, because that may also leave a lot of artists out of, you know, the possibility of they want to put their out there. But number one, the prices are quite insane. And number two, sometimes the price of gas is more than the price of the artwork. But there are other platforms that are not with ETH. There's a platform called Hikatnong that artists are really loving, because it has a currency called pesos, where, you know, it really is super affordable to mint, super easy to mint, and also to buy, where the art is put out there by artists, not in a way that is expensive, but in a way that is more, you know, to show the art. So there are people who are coming up with options, but it is a concern, because unfortunately, yeah, I mean, you know, pointing out to, we are in the middle of a speculative bubble. We have been on bubbles before, where when Bitcoin drops dramatically or ETH drop dramatically, all the collectors, many of the collectors are gone, because these are people, we don't even call them collectors, we call them investors. These are people who are just there to make a fast buck. And who remains when that happens, and if that happens, are going to be the people who are really invested in the community, who are really invested in the art, who really believe in NFTs as not only as Jason says, as a pointer to, but of like you know, a source of different kinds of value. And so I think that even though the bubble is what makes the most waves, obviously, because yeah, $69 million for that artwork is completely absurd, you know. But for instance, I disagree that I think that even though the CryptoPunks are designed as some sort of collectible, I do believe that they will stand the test of time. I think that this is my own personal and subjective opinion, but I do believe that, and it's interesting because it's art that is actually made digitally with not only with an algorithm. These guys have also done art that is actually coded by the blockchain and stuff like that. So there's I think that there are certain projects. I think, you know, it'll happen that there will be projects that I believe will stand the test of time, and others that will be just the result of a bubble. No.
Great. So I'm going to draw a parallel here, and I'm going to direct this one at Jason, but then everybody can jump into it. Last night, New York Christie's sold a Basquiat for $93 million. Jason, are we in a speculative bubble in the traditional art world as well with prices like that? And how can we criticize the NFT bubble that's emerged so much faster, right? When we see those kind of numbers, how are they different in your mind?
Well, I would say that in all asset categories, we are in some kind of frothy bubble situation. There's a lot of conversation about housing prices across the country. There's something going on with liquidity. I'm not an economist, but I'm going to speculate a little bit. There's something going on with liquidity liquidity culture wide. So it's driving GameStop and Dogecoin and house prices and Basquiat's and NFT art. So I think in some sense, there's something broader going on. But as far as bubbles go, I would rather hold the Basquiat than hold the Beeple. As from an investment, if I were sort of gifted the option, I do think that number's absurd, right? My building is right next to the Logan Center, which is a new building on the University of Chicago campus, relatively new art building that I think cost $120 million to build. It's a huge, beautiful art building. So basically half, you've got two Beeples or a huge art building. Which one is more value? So we have some comp or Basquiat's. I mean, I think Basquiat represents a certain moment in the history of painting that probably will have continuity over time. So I would guess that art history books in 50 years still have Basquiat's. So, I think that's the question, like what is the impact of culture? And Basquiat's are actually rare. They're not sort of manufactured rarity. They're actually rare. There aren't many Basquiat paintings.
I was actually very happy that Basquiat overtook the Beeple.
Yeah, I mean,
I was happy about that.
There's definitely something going on sort of more broadly, but there's a difference. And I think people are, it's reasonable to ask questions. It's always been a big media news when a painting, typically a painting, reaches really, really high dollar amounts. That's been with us. I've been following sort of the price of the top end of painting since I've been around art. It's something everyone is interested in. It always makes media headlines. But the Beeple thing is something new, something like I have never seen in my life, that I don't think anyone has ever seen, where an asset sort of rockets to those kinds of heights. So we're comparing Beeple in dollar terms to Rembrandt, and we're comparing Beeple to the Impressionists, and we're comparing Beeple to Basquiat and Picasso. So that's a complicated new situation.
If I may, I don't think we're really comparing them. I think people know, but also
in dollar terms, I'm just talking about in dollar terms. I'm not talking about in anything else, but Christie's established some metric by which we can just compare, right? And the metric is dollars. As far as like historical importance, I don't even think it's a question. Again, no offense meant to people. I think that's really interesting and fantastic, but to put him in the same conversation with Picasso or Rembrandt or Van Gogh or Basquiat is a stretch at this moment. Maybe he will prove that.
Economic conversation. And what is interesting too, I think somebody brought it up. It's really interesting to see who are the people who are collecting, who are the people who are, it's people who have a lot of crypto, and they just don't want to know what to do with it, because
that's
where
really
do
interesting.
You really spend your crypto? You can park it on art, or you can park it on collectibles.
That makes total sense.
Also, it's people also, in the case of people where they were also trying to financialize that artwork. So that also has some sort of like weird connotation. But the collectors are above. I mean, this is where you say like people are naive. I think that a lot of crypto art collectors, they're not that versed on art, but some of them will buy because they're just pumping somebody, or they can see who is the most popular. But we've seen people turn around and really get taken by the art, and really then behave like real collectors, which do go and search for what speaks to them, and look at the art as it needs to be looked on. It doesn't matter, like, Jason, you say that people are not making things. It is true that this is a very digitally native thing, but in DADA, we like to think that it's almost like digitally handmade, because people are still making something. Even the tools that they're using are digital, but they're actually using their imagination. They're making a drawing. So again, I think NFTs are really better used just in the digital environment, but also there's a lot going on in terms of virtual gallery spaces where people can come in and there are talks and there is music, and it's not it's going to start expanding, and there's VR and there's AR and there's all these things that I'm sure you know, but it's not just you look at it on your phone. People are really like kind of forming a community and forming experiences the way they can form them in the digital medium.
Yeah, I feel like there's a spectrum of worlds we're talking about, but if we make it simple, they're kind of two different worlds. There's this sort of high dollar world, which seems very complex, absurd, and it does seem to do with, I like your explanation of basically you've got a lot of cryptocurrency liquidity and you need to do something with it. That makes total sense to me, actually.
Yeah, they call it FU money.
Yeah, that makes sense.
How is that different from hedge funds or private equity firms that do the same, or high-end collectors who do the same?
It's just what they're buying with it. You know, buying a digital file. Buying a pointer to a digital file is a new thing to do. But I am completely, I should say, I'm completely supportive of the democratization that these sort of smart contract pointers allow. Like, I think that's a really fantastic development. I think it's super interesting. It allows people from any place in the world to, from their computer, make a thing. And Judy, I should say, I've been evangelizing for the value of making things on computers for a long time. So I'm definitely with you there. I mean is that a digital thing that you only encounter on a screen seems impoverished relative to the full gamut of possibilities of encountering art. But let's put that aside for a second. I think it's a fantastic development that someone in any part of the world can, from their bedroom, make a reputation for themselves, make digital objects that people are interested in, and find a way to monetize that and bring money for themselves, their family, for their creativity. That is fantastic. Like, I think that's the best part of this, is that there's a kind of opening up of vistas to people who could never get to New York or could never get to London, and just never would have a chance of finding a dealer who would be able to sort of represent them at those scale, just because of circumstances. It doesn't have anything to do with talent, doesn't have anything to do with anything but circumstances. So that's really wonderful. That's one part of the conversation. And there's this other part of the speculative bubble part of the conversation. I think you and I basically agree on. It's absurd and weird, and you know.
But also, I think that what is interesting
into the conversation real quick, if you don't mind.
Of
So we're talking about visual art with this conversation between Judy and Jason. Music is so much more difficult, isn't it? Like the sea of music, digital music that may be out there. How do you differentiate your work, or how does any musician differentiate their work in that sea of music that's out there compared to a visual?
Thank you. I think, first of all, it's incredibly poignant that this discussion it gravitates so heavily towards visual art, and there is the conversation not just here, but like on the internet. There's very little about music. In the music realm, most of the conversations are about the celebrities themselves. So it really is a conversation about celebrity. No one's really talking about music. And in the English language markets, where royalty systems are more mature, the problem is not so dire that it requires immediate attention. But in, I think, Asian economies, where the royalty systems are relatively poor and overly simplistic and not far-reaching, I would really appreciate attention, and I'm trying to galvanize as much as I can, so that not so much that the big companies should come in and join. In fact, the opposite. I want the indie guys to come into the space by themselves, for themselves, and the problem is I can't force anyone to make NFTs. All I can say is they have to want to make it. All I can do is encourage them to do it for themselves and hopefully create a wave. And I'm hoping for like a good percentage, like 20% of indie musicians to put out their music. I'm not talking about the guys who put out an album and then like next thing you know, they're like starring in TV shows and like going to galas and cutting ribbons. I'm talking about the people who are making the music and rely on music to make a living because that is their craft. And
would you say the platform exists for musicians today? Or do
There
you
are a
think
couple
all
of,
these visual platforms are needing to be adapted to music? And
there are
should
far
be something
fewer
exclusive
musical
for music?
platforms. Thank you, Mark. There are far fewer platforms for music than there are for visual things, simply because NFTs, no matter how you want to display them on a projector, a TV screen, or in a meta gallery, you can in one look see 13 works of art, but you can only at one time hear one piece of music. So that is already a disadvantage. Two, music is tied to a lot of systems. Like one piece of music has like 6 different kinds of rights linked to it, and 6 different organizations governing these rights. So like musicians who are already in the current market will have difficulty putting out NFTs. However, the people who are starving and still cannot even make $1 from it yet, and coming into this place, they can put out NFTs easily because they probably own most or all of their rights, and they can do something. And I'm encouraging them to do something, because I'm thinking about the guys tomorrow who have no way in right now. Right now in the Chinese industry, all the new producers and writers they all come from comfortable families, and there's a reason for that. And at the same time, I wanna say, like, I saw a question by Ray about like, how are there any places to look at for how to do music NFTs? If you're like if you're an EDM or trap or folk producer, you can try Audius, where you can upload your entire multi-track files, and it's up for grabs for other creators to make remixes of it, and you can collect royalties on them. That's Audius. And then they're trying to become a decentralized streaming platform, and I hope that works. There are a couple of decks that I've seen from various parties. Some are ex-record label people, some are ex-Chinese media people, online media, and they're trying to create streaming or content hub type platforms as well. Some are more scammy than others, some are more well-meaning. We'll see what happens there, but like I'm gonna put forward, because Judy's talked about Tezos, and I want to talk a bit about Binance, because Ethereum is expensive and it will only get more expensive until the bubble breaks, of course. And Binance is 100 times cheaper than Ethereum to mint and to gas. So my next drop is probably going to be on a Binance platform, my next 2 drops. And so like, pay attention, look at my website, 10engine.com. I'll be documenting my journey. I will be dropping some hand-holding videos, and I will be dropped over the course of this month. And I'll look at my first drop on OpenSea. That is a demo for any musician to literally copy the format and just change out the song and change out the story and the narrative. And there you have it. That's your first drop. Drop that and then talk to me on IG. I will handhold you through the rest of the way to your next drop, because that's the easiest way to educate. And Binance is cheaper. And when the Binance platforms open, it will be scary to get in. So let me be the first one. Let me take the hits, and I'll be able to handhold you guys. So that's all I'm saying.
Great. Oh, that's a great offer. I'm sure you'll have a lot of takers on that. I have a macro question, and I think Judy is probably the best person to answer this question, because you mentioned Argentina and Chile, and the question is, where around the globe is the greatest intensity of energy around NFT art creation today?
You know, it's very interesting. I really don't have stats for you, but I think it's truly a global movement, because since it's digital, it really now doesn't matter where you are. Like Jason was saying, like we have artists from Kenya, we have artists from all of Latin America. I think in China, you know, we have people from China coming in to draw. I think also it depends on like certain countries. You know, the interesting thing about this peer-to-peer blockchain thing is that in countries like Mexico, Venezuela, people can actually get money without having to go through the onerous bureaucracy of banks and stuff like that. So there's, in certain countries, I think for lack of a better word, developing countries, there's a lot of, you know, for instance, now Cuban artists, and Cuba is a perfect case in point of complete economic collapse and lack of opportunity for people. The Cubans are super artists into NFTs, and I think there is one person in Cuba that, because I asked a question like, how do you transfer the ETH or the cryptocurrency to fiat money, and apparently there's one person in Cuba who does that, and it's their only way out. So I think in places where economic conditions are difficult and you know, there is this kind of interesting explosion of projects. I know in Mexico there are not only, it's not so much the art projects, but there are companies that instead of Western Union, you know, for instance, all the people who send money from the United States to Mexico, well, now you can do it maybe also with crypto, you know, and crypto has, some of it can go up in value. So I think that it also depends on the countries. Like Hanjin is talking about Binance, and in the United States, there's still some confusion about what is allowed and what currencies you can buy and what currencies you can't buy. And Binance, you have to have a special Binance US account. You can't really buy currency on the Binance. So it also depends on how restricted things are in certain places, no?
Great, thank you.
Yeah, bingo.
Oh, go ahead, Hanjin.
I'll make mine short. In China, there are other restrictions as well. There are places in Afghanistan where women cannot open bank accounts. There are places in Africa where people have no access to transferring their fiat to just for savings. And that's where cryptocurrencies really help. And like artists in these environments, they can rely on NFTs to make a living where previously all they could do was like sell their work by the side of the street, or put a hat down on the side of the street and play their instrument and busk and for pittance. And NFTs is a way to get their work out, because God knows in those places they don't have record labels who are gonna like reach out to find talent, and there are definitely no systems to protect these artists and musicians who are trying to put out their work. And we're talking about making a living, not so much about being successful or like.
But also I have to say, like, if you look at the bulk of for instance, the crypto art community, a lot of it is also the United States and, you know, Europe. There's a lot of artists from those places as well, right? And I mean, most of the speculative stuff is coming from there, although it's totally global. You know, there's people, you know, the people who bought the Beeple are based in India, I believe. And so there's no borders in this thing.
I'll tell you something funny. I'm from Singapore, right? And when I dropped my NFT, some of my friends were like, you got to get the papers to write about you. And like the papers didn't want to write about me because they were busy writing about Mita Kovan. Mita Kovan apparently is in Singapore. So like they're treating him as Singaporean and they don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, but the point is that they're not from the United States or not from your classic.
Yeah,
you know.
Exactly. Jason, you know, I know you have a lot of interesting Silicon Valley contacts. And based on what you're hearing today and maybe some information that you may have, do you see the Facebooks, the Googles, the Apples, the Amazons at any time in the near future jumping into this space?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know about the sort of behemoths. I mean, I know that Facebook's tried to have their own currency, so you know that's been widely reported. I will say that maybe to focus on art dealers and the art market more specifically, there is already a move toward at least looking at NFTs, and one of the major sort of media art dealers in New York has started his own NFT platform. So I think, you know, there's no denying that the fire is lit under this thing. You know, I'm part of my resistance is kind of personal. I'm naturally a contrarian. So when I see like the mad dash, I'm just like, not want to be there. That is not for me. So I have to sort of gauge the kinds of realities and practicalities of this. But again, I still am going to make things for spaces and for humans to walk around and look at in person. even if it's basically a file driven, you know, I've done lots of file driven artwork that exists on screens, but I still think a lot about that screen and what size that screen should be and what resolution and all the details that are engaged in with encountering an object in person versus kind of, I'll just give you a file and you look at it wherever you want on whatever platform you want, and you get to be in control. And you, as an audience member, I kind of want the artist to be more assertive about what the object is and what it is I'm looking at. I want the artist to tell me what its real nature is. And if it's just a bed of pixels, that's pretty, you know, there's a lot of decision making then on the viewer about what a thing can be. But just to get back to your question, I absolutely think that some version of this is here and it's not going anywhere. I think the art market, the traditional fine art market, will have to address it and contend with it. I think that collectors will expect some version of an NFT for any kind of ephemeral artwork. So you've got performance artists and video artists and all kinds of different artists who make work that's harder to collect, has traditionally been harder to collect. This may be really helpful for them. There was a question about like the dealer as middleman in the chat, in the Q&A, that I thought was interesting. And it points at one of the, I think, interesting spots and where I talk about naivety. The fine art world, and it's been moving away from this for some time now, but has been built on a kind of tradition of connoisseurship. And dealers and curators, writers, all sort of act as gatekeepers, to be frank, and help sort of filter up for collectors and institutions what art will be valued in the future. And so there's a kind of gatekeeping process that fine art dealers have always served, certainly in the last century. And I think that is going to get upset by this, the direct to market nature of this. And I think these two recent big sales, Christie's is the only art world entity involved that went around everything, right? That is another new thing.
Sotheby's is also auctioning some NFT very soon. They're all getting into it.
Yeah, of course.
Oh,
why,
yes,
why wouldn't they? They have no choice, right? They have to. It is interesting that a couple of years ago, Christie's also sold a physical print of an AI artwork, and that was a big splash at the time, and has some similar contours to this conversation, although at a much different price point relatively. So I do think the other thing I think maybe is interesting is there has been a hesitance, Mark, you kind of allude to. A lot of the wealth in Silicon Valley has not been interested in buying art. And dealers have tried to like set up shop in San Francisco or even directly in like Palo Alto, and have not had success with that. And I think this digital native form will be appealing to sort of, you know, founders and people who've made their wealth in. So that's an interesting, this is my art. Finally, you know, I don't have to these old oil paintings, but I have like, you know, this new, and I have a place in my heart for that. I have some feeling that, you know, my whole career I've spent invested in thinking that what computational processes, algorithms, big data, all these things brought to visual culture were just amazing, and that we needed to, as a maker, tap into those things. And that is now bearing fruit, interestingly. And I think, you know, ultimately, I'd rather talk about the forms of art that are enabled by these structures rather than spend a bunch of time talking about like a pointer certificate of authenticity, which, while interesting today, I hope we don't spend years talking about these NFTs. I hope these NFTs are just mechanisms by which we, you know, make transactions less friction, you know. And
I think there's going to be also some experimentation. We're very, very excited about the fact that NFTs can be layered. So people can actually add layers of creativity to the NFT. For instance, you know, we could take some of our drawings, that's one layer, animated is another layer, add a song by Hanjin, that's another layer. And you create a whole new work, and everybody gets their cut, and everybody is also authenticated, and you know, there's as you know, they're ascribed and everything. So that's where I don't agree with you that it's just a pointer, because it does have a utility. And in the fact, not only is it a certificate of authenticity, not only does it give automatic income or royalties, or has that kind of use, but also there's the experimentation that comes with, different forms of art melding together. And the other thing that they do, and I think this is a point from very early on, is that it really stands the idea of collecting on its head a little bit. It's just that collecting is going to be different. And there was this article in the New York Times a couple of days ago where the collectors of this art don't feel the same way that traditional collectors do, that I want to show it at dinner or no one else can see it. They go, I think it adds to the value that I own it, because I have it and I can sell it, but everyone can see it. They don't see this as a conflict at all. And they actually think the more the merrier in a way. So that's why I don't agree with it's just like some sort of pointer. It has, and it'll be really interesting to see how they develop. Like, people are creating transformable ones that start as one thing and end as another. All kinds of interesting imaginative
Judy,
things.
Thanks,
Judy, can
Yeah.
I ask you something? Can we start a conversation whereby I could bring musicians to collaborate with visual artists in your community?
Yeah.
Because God knows we need to collaborate.
Yeah. We did a live drawing performance where we had people drawing on DADA from all over the world, while they were drawing to the music that was being performed in a live stage. And people, could see the streaming of the concert, and they were drawing to the music. But there are many, many ways that we could do it. Certainly, we have to continue.
Yahoo. and the idea of reactive NFTs, whether to any form of data stream from the real world or the blockchain world, that's something that I hold very close to my heart, because music cannot exist on its own anymore. I had this conversation with a representative of an art gallery, and not art gallery. It's I forgot if it was Christie's or Sotheby's, and said, like, if you did, Hanjin, a famous work, famous as you are, with a famous visual artist, we will value your work solely on the visual artist content. Your music will solely, we will only value it as BGM, background music. And I was like, okay, thank you for your frankness. But that is the truth, and I have to accept it. And I have to work with what I've been given. So this is what I've been given, and this is what I'm going to work with. And audio, reactive NFTs, audio or visual or anything, the weather, blah blah. These are things that I'm working on, and if you guys are interested, anyone's interested who's listening in, hit me up, DM me. I've just had a conversation yesterday with some guys who write codes. They're just coders, and they're saying, like, NFTs. The NFT code is 7 lines, yes, but it's so underutilized. And I'm like, how? So he starts to explain to me how, like, there are a lot of variables that you could adjust so that it could do a lot more things. You could have you could have much more complicated smart contracts that are more protective of buyers, owners, and ethics inside the thing itself. It doesn't have to be a subcode. And I was like, those are things that I'm interested in working on. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Jason, please, back to you.
Okay, we're going to need to wrap up the program, but I do have one more question, and this is for Jason. It's from an anonymous attendee. It says foundation, and we were supposed to have a foundation rep here last week, but that didn't turn out. Foundation is an NFT platform that is made by art experts. Only curated artwork can be sold on it. Would you think that would address your concerns about jumping into the NFT space? Judy and Hanjin, they're in it. They're all in it.
So I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it right now, and I automatically recognize multiple of the artists that are on here. It does make sense, but if I can give you like a gut response, and I don't know if this will be a popular response, and maybe I'm the one who's going to have to adjust here. I don't want to be on like an Etsy, you know, it feels like Etsy. I don't want to, I've spent 30 years making a reputation in a different kind of community, and the kind of flattening that happens when you just list a bunch of stuff and you have an infinite scroll of images and you get to pick and choose. That's all, it's obviously part of our culture and it's obviously important. But the affect, if I'll use an academic term, the affect and the texture of it is definitely off-putting. And it's not the platform's fault, and it's actually just nobody's fault. Personally, this sort of like, I'll just put my work on this platform and it'll be in a grid with a gajillion other people. And yes, someone spent some time really trying to curate it, and I appreciate that. And I see value. And like I said, two of the first three artists I know and respect their work, and I think they're really interesting artists. So I think Foundation's probably doing a really nice job of curating. But there is an Etsification, I've coined that term, of this. And like, Judy, what's the other platform? What is it called?
HitNonk, but it's very different because
well,
they
I know
have
a bunch of artists that are on there as well, but you scroll through it and the flatness. So this is where it's complex. The downside maybe of over democratization is a pure flattening, where no one's gatekeeping. There's not really a consideration of historical priorities and the story of culture. Now we're just, hey, it becomes more akin to like visual fast food, where did I like that? Did I like that one? I like that one. And that's not the world I come from. However, I appreciate that this is a meaningful way for everyone to participate in the enjoyment and the evaluation of art. And so I'm in real time, I'm trying to come to terms with these sort of different perspectives. But like I said, the first thing I felt when I looked at Foundation was, wow, that looks fantastic. I like a lot of these artists, and boy, it feels like an upscale Etsy, right? And so that's, and no offense to Etsy, by the way, I'm just saying it's not where I've lived.
In this world, there's already certain like platforms, not platforms, like there's these people called Mogda, which are really like doing what you're saying, like looking at the art, trying to do it in a way that gives a historical content. This is really, really, really new. It's only like 4 years old.
For sure.
So as more artists come in, and there's such a wide breadth of artists, so there will be that kind of more perhaps scholarly look into it. To me, Foundation is not different from Super Rare or from any of the platforms where they're basically replicating the model of curation, but without maybe the exclusive that much exclusivity. But to me, it's and it's by invitation, and so that's not what we are interested in. We're interested in really not doing something completely different.
I mean, just like the art world, there will be different kinds of sort of worlds, and I appreciate, it's clear that I think, generally speaking, everyone's heart is in the right place with regard to this. I mean, there might be some, different kinds of manipulative speculation stuff going on, but from the production side, I think the artist's heart is in the right place, and I think the platform's heart are in the right place. They're trying to provide value, and I think all of that's really interesting. It is a big change, that flattening, that in fine art, the solo exhibition is this really important moment, right? You have planned for maybe 2 years to occupy a really interesting space in a big city, and your work is up for a month or 6 weeks, and it's just dedicated to your project, and that's really meaningful, and you take it really, really seriously as an artist. You should, and that might lead to institutional support and museums and these other things. Those are obviously, that's not available to everybody. And
but there's no reason why it shouldn't happen in this
they
way.
coexist,
It's
obviously.
the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I went to the viewing party for the CryptoPunks auction. We weren't not at Christie's, that was not but there was a gallery in New York City, a physical gallery where invited people and streamed the thing, and there was like people were clapping. I mean, there was this human A lot of people came, collectors came from all over the United States to New York to be in a room to watch us streaming because of the pandemic and stuff. I mean, so there is a bridge. There's, you know, these things are going to happen more.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I do think that some of the things that I instinctively might have complaints about will find ways to be addressed. I mean, part of it I think is like everything lives in browsers, and you know, like all of our lives are in browsers and screens and windows, and that is not what I want for my art. It honestly is not. You know, there are other places to participate in culture than you know, than inside windows. And so the window is a necessarily flattening kind of device. I think it would be a complaint about my own participation in these spaces. But again, I don't think I'm the only one with that complaint, by the way. I think a lot of people would feel kind of uncomfortable with the idea of getting themselves in a big grid with a bunch of other people, and then you just are shopping. That maybe isn't the experience that every artist wants to have. And so there might have to be platforms that kind of address that a little bit, like you're talking about, that maybe approach things through a more scholarly lens, or not. I'm not. It's open-ended, and it's certainly exciting. And I've really appreciated both learning from you guys and participating in the conversation. So
that's a great way to transition out of the program. We've run way over time, but it's been a really fascinating conversation. And Jason and Judy and Hanjin, I want to thank you for participating in the program this evening and for the lively conversation. I think we could go on a whole lot longer. I'd like to encourage the participants, the audience, that if they have any thoughts or ideas about content or direction that we could take this NFT series, please send them to our email that you can find on our website. And in the meantime, Gigi, I want to have you put that link to the video that's on our website in the chat box if you can. We prepared a video link, which I encourage all of you to check out. It's really fascinating. I was doing some research on Basquiat over the last few weeks, and there's a 1996 video of the musician David Bowie and the artist and filmmaker Julian Schnabel, who were talking about the movie Basquiat that they made together, as well as talking about graffiti art and the art industry as a whole. And it's really interesting, the parallels between the graffiti art of the 1970s and the 1980s and NFT art, and where we think we're at today and where we may be going. I think it'll give you all something really interesting to think about. So I encourage you to watch that. Hopefully Gigi's been able to put that in the chat box. And so we'll sign out this evening, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great evening or day wherever you may be, and please stay safe.